From beautiful East Tennessee in the foothills of the Smoky Mountains, you're listening to the Sherry Voluntary Show, and I certainly do appreciate you spending your time with me today. My guest is someone that you may not be familiar with, but you're going to really want to be familiar with the technology that he's developing. He is the former... Well, not former, really. You're the inventor, founder, and chief engineer of 2020 Armor, correct? And that was for the martial arts.
Yeah. It's a scoring technology for martial arts.
Right. Cool. And you're also an aerospace engineer. Is that?
Yeah, that's right. That's my field of study. I have the piece of paper that says I'm an aerospace engineer. Not that matters.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how my background and how I attack everything. I also did work in the private space industry for a bit. So I guess it's right for me to claim that title.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, definitely. So your name is Austin Jones. Mm-hmm. And the cool thing is that we live in the same town, which is really awesome. Yeah. I was excited, like when we first got in contact, and like you were right in town with me. So always good to have another anarchist, voluntarist type around, libertarian anarchy. So
not too many of us.
Yeah. We're a pretty small group. But anyways, so what we wanted to talk about today is a new project that you have going on that I think is really exciting. It's really novel. And I think anyone that's interested in equality under the law and your right to self-defense is really going to hopefully applaud this. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Atlas Arms and what you're doing?
Right. Well, so way back in 2011, I was thinking, we got this pesky right to bear arms, but the bureaucrats like to pick it apart. So what will they do? I think they'll restrict ammunition. So I went to work trying to make a homemade gunpowder factory. And that turns out to be really difficult and really dangerous. Terrible idea.
I just pictured like in the Looney Tunes where they like blow themselves up to the sky.
Yeah, right.
Acme.
No kidding. Wile E. Coyote over here. Yeah. But I was thinking along those lines, of kind of like using technology to kind of distribute the means of production for firearms and keep those in the hands of the people. And then, of course, shortly after that, Defense Distributed came along and did a lot of their work. And, they're I don't have anything to do with them, but they've been like quite instructive.
Sure.
In strategy, especially legal strategy. But then, some ideas hit me in the last a couple years ago, for just like very disruptive and incredibly disruptive technology. And I'm not talking about what that is yet, but I decided if I'm that's a life of work, quite a challenge. So I had to come up with some other concepts that would be, also very disruptive. And the Dagny Dagger is the first concept that Atlas Arms is bringing to bear, and the Atlas Shrugged namesakes are intentional.
Yeah, I can tell you like Ayn Rand, huh?
Well, yeah, it's named for Dagny Dagger, and I wouldn't call myself a hardline objectivist. I'm certainly not affiliated with the Ayn Rand Institute, but I think that her works are marvelous and show us a good gateway into. Or they are a good gateway into a certain philosophy that I hold as virtuous and admirable. So that's what I built it around: individualism, and telling the state, nope, not going to do that.
Yeah. So I mean, you mentioned disruptive. I think to some people that sounds scary. What kind of what would you say to people that why would we want to disrupt this great system that we have at the that keeps us safe? And
oh man, I mean I feel like I should like throw out like a sound bite that other people had kind of a canned response, but if you don't mind, I'd like to dig a little deeper in that. To me, there's something to be said about kind of the spontaneity of life. And lots of people, especially here in America, even if even us that are kind of style ourselves anti-state, we still draw a lot and hold high regard for some of the values in, say, like the Declaration of Independence.
Sure.
We talk about the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and especially here in libertarian circles, we focus on liberty. But I think that really, when you get down to it, the most sacred of those three is the pursuit to happiness. And so, man has this natural environment that is just, it's the wilderness, and even now, in the modern world, you have this kind of responsibility in your life to decide how you're going to make your stand in life and what you're going to do.
Mm.
And you need to draw from the chaos, the wilderness of life, and build your own happiness.
Yeah.
And that's what I think it is. We live in this world where, the neoliberal state likes to tell us, what we are allowed to do, and break the fences and start your homestead in life, literal perhaps, but certainly figuratively, and that's why I don't believe in control, and I believe in disrupting
Yeah.
the control structures the way they are.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of people, especially those on the more authoritarian end of the spectrum, they really don't take into consideration that. Yeah, I didn't think of it this way either before I was an anarchist, that you live anarchy all day long. Like, nobody is telling us what to wear and, how to, we should brush our teeth. Like, that's all education thing. It's anarchy. It's just learning how to live life. And so really those authoritarian states and regimes, whatever, they're an obstacle to people just living their life the way that they see fit. And so I think a lot of times what people in those kind of what we call status type circles, authoritarians, they look at something like the Constitution and they make it sacred. And I think that's where the problem is. The rights that it memorialized, they're not bad. Like, that's not the bad part of it. The centralizing of power is. But when they talk about, say, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed, they always say shall not be infringed. Well, yes, but it's not because the paper said so. It's because every human has a right to defend themselves.
Of course.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting conversation, I think, a lot of times with people on that end, because they are often, at least in our area, Republican Knoxville, more pro-gun, but they have a really hard time with accepting that everyone has the right to defend themselves, and this kind of like the concept of disrupting the state with those weapons. So there's like this real schizophrenia of basically of our Second Amendment rights, as they would call them, are to protect ourselves from government. Like, most of them get that, but then they kind of worship government too. They worship the state. So it's a really, I feel for you in this industry, because it's a really, I think, hard concept for a lot of them to deal with. A lot of the people that will hopefully be supporting you further down the road.
Right. And in fact, this project is going to be interesting, I think, because, for those, supposedly pro-gun rights conservatives, I think this is really going to be an issue and challenge that.
Yeah.
But maybe we should talk about the nature of the project and why that might be.
Yeah, let's get into it. I would love to.
Okay. Well, so the Dagny Dagger, so named for Dagny Taggart, and in particular, what I had in mind is the scene in which she shoots the guard that refuses to do anything other than, or he refuses to think for himself and will only follow orders and can't decide what to do because he has no mind for himself. And so the Dagny Dagger is it's a project to develop a new type of bullet. A bullet that is capable of penetrating armor, particularly soft armor, all soft armor from severe angles, even from short barrels. Will it do it very, very easily? And perhaps we can even defeat some armor that's plate steel, rated to protect against rifle cartridges. And of course now, armor-piercing ammunition is illegal. You can't make it. Of course you can sell it, because the NRA and those pro-gun conservatives stood up for the rights of the gun dealers to sell it.
Right.
But of
Yeah.
course, not our rights to actually have it
Yeah.
and make it for ourselves. So I will sidestep that. You have the rulers of this state, of this nation state. They think they can control everything. They think that they can write it on paper and make it so, and
Right.
that just isn't so. I mean, who are these people? These people don't live in the real world. They make their
Right.
living, sitting on a hill and talking to each other, yelling at each other all day, getting on TV and galvanizing their supporters. They don't know what the real world is.
Yeah.
And so people, people like us that we work for a living, we know how the world works. We are the creators, and all they can do is react to what we do. So
Yeah.
they think that they can tell us this is what armor piercing ammunition is. Well, there's new technology in town, and I will show them that their definition is worthless.
Yeah. It really kind of goes to the myth of authority, that there's this myth that you have to have someone tell you what to do, or else anarchy, your neighbors are gonna come kill you. And of course we know that that's not even close to being correct. But the agorism and nullification kind of enveloped in your project, I think is really, really, it's a beautiful thing to me as an anarchist, because it's not that I want to kill people or hurt people. It's that I believe in protection, and also that all rights are held within the individual. And so if there is any, like, I know people make the argument that there is a certain need for a government or governance, and whatever, you can make those arguments, I guess. But what it really comes down to is, do you believe in that authority, and do you give them the rights, or rights that you don't actually possess? So they, like with this, you talk on your website about the Reagan administration, and he is like the paragon of all the Republicans look up to him, and many libertarians really view him as a hero. And yet he's the one who enacted this legislation that curtailed the use of these cop killer bullets, as the media played it up to be.
Yeah, right.
What I guess is the answer to help people get past that, and sort of past that fear of it, that we're wanting to kill cops, and really it has nothing to do with that. It really is about defending ourselves, and particularly defending ourselves from the state, because that's what even the founders and the framers of the Constitution that they uphold, they were traitors and cop killers, right, all those things.
I think perhaps like the first intuition that should come to us isn't explaining ourselves. I think we're almost past that. I think maybe the most effective way to demonstrate our position is to just do it. And I think that's what this is about. I'm not going to, spend time campaigning to change the law. I'm not going to ask these legislators that don't like me
right,
to change the law for me. I don't feel a need to explain it to anybody. I just have to, I'll just do it.
Yeah.
But I'd like to explain myself if I can. I think it's just, it's different. It's different for everything. For everyone, I should say. I find it very important that people get to know me. I'll throw this out there. I'll say, this is what I believe in. And you can deal with it, because your laws and your lawmakers, they don't know what's going on with this.
Right.
They can't stop it. It is going to be what it is. And then if they want to know why, then I'll tell them. So it comes secondary for me.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps maybe I shouldn't tell them that I'm not interested in violence. And I'm not. I would not describe myself as anti-cop. I would describe myself as, I wish that cops were not cops in
Yeah.
the way that I wish that axe murderers were not axe murderers.
Yes.
I wish that they did not do the evil acts that they do, but if I don't wish any particular harm on them.
Yeah.
That said, I have to be honest and say, look, man, that document that you honor so much, that Second Amendment, it is there to ensure that we have the ability to kill cops.
Right.
That's what it is. It just is. And you got to decide if you got to make the decision if you believe in police privilege or you believe in firearms rights. That's it. That's all there is to it. So, I mean, I hate to say it, but I'm a little bit more abrupt on the issue.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to make them understand.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing because I have these conversations all the time as well with, especially about police, because I think there's such a hero worship involved with most people and the back the blue mentality, which is no matter what they do, their jobs are hard and they're public servants. They're the good guys. And Daniel and I, when we were on the radio show Speaking Freely, we often talked about this subject, and Daniel made a really great point once, which I love what he said, which was that the thin blue line used to mean for people that it was the cops between the good guys and the bad guys protecting the good guys. Now, I don't know how true that ever really was, but it certainly isn't true now when now the thin blue line means them protecting themselves against the people. And so this is, we can go into that, why there are no good cops, because the ones who would stand up don't, and the ones who do are fired. And they really have this sort of, you used to call like an all boys club, even though there are females. It's just a way they protect each other, a good old boys club. And
yeah, it's something that's very interesting on that line of thought. That idea, the thin blue line, comes from a movie with the same title, and the line in the movie was the thin blue line separates us from anarchy. And I think that's very interesting because, of course, what they imagine as anarchy is different than what we do. But in fact, they have told us specifically in that phrase that our vision, for the world, what is a virtue for us, its natural enemy is the police.
Right.
So, in saying that, even their own argument to legitimize themselves is, in fact, an affront to I don't know, people that believe like we do or hold our virtues.
Yeah. I think, I was just reading today, I posted this thing on Facebook about, it's Michael Bolden, a quote from him. He's heads up the 10th Amendment Center. He said, "Today's revolution for liberty is about learning to live free, whether the federal government wants us to or not." So that's I think the point that you were making a little earlier is that you don't, which I really like, that you don't need to necessarily explain yourself first, because then it's kind of asking permission, right? Because we don't, you are free, and free men don't ask permission. You don't need permission to assert your rights. And we've really gotten into a state where people believe that what is legal is also moral. And so you have these ideas of, that maybe aren't to the point of, say, genocide yet, but they certainly lead down that road of tyrannical governments where, because the law says it's okay. And we've got right now, one of the things I think people hate the most when I talk to them about the police is that, look, they can rob you on the side of the road. They're a gang, and the only difference in them and any other street gang is that they have the legality behind them of people that, like you were saying, they don't work. They're up on Capitol Hill. They make arguments. And it's like the biggest lie almost today is that, you have two separate competing ideologies when really there's nothing to that. Like they are the same, and they work in tandem to affect and, make caveats on your rights. Sure. So it's a really interesting area to be dealing in, I think. And so I think that's one of the reasons why this technology you're developing is so revolutionary, is because it really makes people make a choice. Like, do I really believe in freedom? And this is why often I think I'm much harder on people on the right than the left, because I live in a place where it's the right and left paradigm, whatever.
Sure.
For descriptive purposes, but that the area here is very Republican, and they have the rhetoric of freedom down. Like they can talk about these principles all day, but when it really comes down to living those principles, and the rubber meets the road, as they say, they often don't really believe in those principles. They believe in the principles for the common good, and that the common good is a caveat to
right.
your rights.
I often say that's I think that's really the kink in the ethics of well, unfortunately, I believe most people is, to me, utility is entirely irrelevant to morals. And I think that's really it. Anytime you hear somebody say the greater good, that should make you shudder. I mean, the only reason that there's ever a reason to say that is to justify something else evil.
Right.
I mean, literally, I can't. Excuse me. I can't think of a moment that I've ever heard that it wasn't used for that. And I mean, look, there's a choice to be made. Either right and wrong are objective, or they're not. And I think that for a lot of people, it just is that. I mean, they'll say no, good and evil are relative. But I'm a Christian, and we talked about before we began. I believe wholeheartedly there is an objective good, there is an objective evil. And good and evil do not care about the situation in which you find yourself. They do not care about the utility of the situation. An action is virtuous or it is vice. And those don't change.
Yeah, and vice isn't determined by what some person said on a piece of paper.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's a really interesting too, because this area happens to be mostly Christian as well, and so I always try and bring that conversation back to what they say they believe, because if for anarchists. You've heard that saying, I'm sure, that, when I got rid of all my excuses, I became an anarchist. Because really that's what it's about. It's about whittling away those inconsistencies. And that's really how I started down the road, is I started listening to different people as I was reading Ayn Rand. And although I'm not necessarily an objectivist either, I think, she was brilliant, and a lot of critical thinking skills are taught through her work, really. But that... when I come to people, I always try to say, well, if you're a Christian, do you believe do unto others? Like, do you believe that? And if they say yes, then I say, well, there are no caveats on that. He didn't say, Christ didn't say do unto others as you would have them do unto you, except for if, the police are coming to raid the house or whatever. There's no caveat on that. And that... It's really bothersome to people sometimes, and the mental backflips that people have to go through to justify the state and authority in our lives. And it really, I think everybody on some level can understand that anarchy is not violence. But it's the safety aspect that people can't let go of. That for most people, the sad thing is that for most people in this country today, safety is more important than liberty. And I just, trying to get that across. And I think, like I said, projects like yours are really putting people in the position where they have to take a stand.
Yeah. But, I mean, sure, like, I think that through... I don't know, philosophy, we could get to the point where we say that safety is demonstrably less important than liberty. But it goes beyond that. I mean, you might choose that for yourself, but do you have the agency over others to choose that for them? That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
That's, at what point are you willing to hurt someone for your safety? That's it. You got to draw that line
For the greater good.
Yeah, right. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But,
so, sort of getting back to your project. So you, I know you're going to crowdfund this.
Yes.
And so I'm sure it can't be cheap. So, but you're going through a site called gundynamics.com,
Yeah, that's
right?
right. That's right.
And I imagine that's because the other platforms don't want to have anything to do with guns, the evil guns.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I had learned about them through you, actually. And so I think kudos to them if they see this. We need people willing to stand up for and say, we're not going to be intimidated by the fear cycle that is driven by the state and the media and all that to hedge us into these positions where then we're disarmed and it's Catalonia or something where you're not able to take back your country or France even, like they just rioted and everything, but they couldn't really make the government do what needed to be done, what they thought needed to be done anyways.
Yeah. And I mean, I entirely agree with what you're saying. It's interesting that it seems that, the utility in fact lies, and I think I could definitely argue that the utility lies in making the moral choice of liberalism and freedom. But for me, my mind doesn't even go to those places. I don't even think about, well, if they take it away, then, they could rule us with an iron fist. Again, to me, it just comes back to, I want to be able to do this thing in my life.
Right.
I don't even have to go as far for my justification and my drive. I don't even have to go as far as what could happen if. For me, it's just, I want to smash up the dead end sign that is put there by the regulation, and I want to travel into the forest.
Yeah. The scary, dark forest.
Yeah, well, but look, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's worth living for. What I mean is living in a padded room good?
Right.
Is that? I mean, no. You kill yourself.
Yeah, gilded cages are still cages.
Well, there you go. There you go.
And that is kind of another point too, that I think comfort, overwhelming comfort and luxury even that most people live with today really keeps them from, they have all this good stuff to lose, because freedom is actually scary. I get that. I tell people all the time, I get that real freedom is scary, but do I believe in radical freedom? Yes, I do. But I also do believe in radical personal responsibility.
Sure.
And so should you. Like, everyone is responsible for themselves. So it's just getting past that point and recognizing that I would rather have a more uncertain life than have one that I'm not free to, I'm hindered in asserting my rights.
Right.
And that's really what you're talking about.
Yeah, for me, that's it. That's my drive. Is I want to build my homestead where I want to build it, and I don't want somebody else to tell me where. I'm looking in the forest to build my happiness. That's it.
That's great. Yeah, living free. And I think that's sort of the idea of nullification and agorism is that we're just going to live our lives and we're going to do what we're going to do, and we're going to avoid the state at all, when possible. But when it comes down to it, I'm not going to bow to the state in order to express my opinions or my rights or whatever, because they are mine. They're inherent within the fact that I'm breathing and living, and I don't need your permission to do that. So, it's great. I really have become more bold over the past couple years that I've, it's always a learning experience, right? Especially coming from where I did as a flag waving, blue backing neocon that I was to where I'm at now. I've come to understand anarchy to an even greater extent, I think, over the past year, just from doing things like this and research for shows and stuff. And it makes you bold. It makes you understand the need for boldness. And that we have. At first, I was a little bit scared to say I'm an anarchist, especially in this area.
I can identify with that.
Yeah, and I homeschool my kids, and a lot of the homeschool groups are very religious, very. It's not necessarily the religious part of it, but the the conservative part of it. They are afraid of, an anarchist, and they're very much on the authoritarian side. And so I didn't want my kids to have to suffer that consequence. But then the more I thought about it, I kept saying, well, I have nothing to be ashamed of. To say people
Right,
should be able to live free is not shameful. And to talk about people's rights is not shameful. And if they are able to make me scared to do that, well, they're wrong. It's not me that's wrong.
right.
And I need to provide that example for my kids and for other people to stand within the rights that I know that I have.
Yeah, it's important to have that vocabulary, and what a profound effect of a word being taboo has. I mean, it's not, I mean, sure, you can say that you're an anarchist, but the meaning of that, you can't even go there. You could describe yourself other ways. In fact, I don't even think that I don't think describing myself as an anarchist is very meaningful, honestly. Like, what does that mean? I'm against rulers. Well, what else does that mean?
Yeah.
So, pragmatically, maybe the best way to describe myself is an anti-federalist or an individualist. I think those are more descriptive, but there's a certain finality, a certain, abandon about giving in and saying, fine, I'm an anarchist. That is freeing. I mean, it's perhaps one of the walls that you break yourself. That is the fence, perhaps. When you can label yourself an anarchist, then you've broken down the fence that's containing you, or at least one of them.
Yeah, it is very freeing, and it's one of the mental cages. That so often, like, bars made of steel may keep you in somewhere, but they can't keep your mind in. But we often cage our own minds for different reasons. And well, that's not, people are afraid of the word anarchy. And I get that. There is a sort of practicality to calling yourself something that's not so scary to them, because they've had years and years of indoctrination on what that term means. And, we understand it doesn't, but they can't even get to that part yet. So maybe down the line, but now I just kind of am at that point where I'm just going to be who I am, and I'm going to piss some people off. It's going to happen. But I think about that Churchill quote, and Churchill wasn't necessarily the greatest guy, but this is such a great quote where he says, so you have enemies? Well, great. It means you've stood up for something in your life. And really, what's more important to me, making people happy or setting them free? Like, helping them to set themselves free.
Well, do you want
that's
better,
really
setting
what
yourself free?
Yeah.
I think that's really...
Yeah.
That's the top
absolutely.
of that chain. And but yeah, I'm with you there.
Yeah, I think it's a high goal, a high calling to, like you said, you're a person of faith, and, as Christ setting the captives free is what Christianity, a big portion of that is about. It's also in our own minds that we have to set ourselves free of the things that bind us from our environment that don't serve us, that really don't serve us, and they don't serve our development in the best way. But to get back to project, it's such a great conversation. But so the cost we were talking about, going the funding.
When did we leave that?
I know we really got out there somewhere, but it's great. I mean, I know my audience anyway is interested to hear these kinds of things. Some of the viewers haven't ever heard maybe these concepts, so it's really, I think, important to temper what we're talking about with some of the philosophy behind it.
It's your show. You
But so what are the costs looking like, at least to begin with? I know it's hard to tell.
So I'll tell you the first thing that I need to buy is ballistics testing equipment. Now, lots of people out there, maybe some of your audience is into firearms such that they reload ammunition. I don't know. But, there's a chronograph, and people know what that is. You shoot a bullet through it, and it tells you how fast it's going. I think a lot of people think about that, and maybe some other equipment. But what we need is things like a universal receiver and very high-end meters. So it's a pressure transducer tells us how much pressure is in the chamber when the round fires, and some electronic instrumentation to get a good signal out on that. There are kind of two manufacturers in the world of these of these instruments, and the price is quite high. So immediately, that's what I need to buy. That's to get started. I've kind of done all the development I can without that. But with the this bullet is very, it's not like others. In fact, I have with me.
Oh, cool.
A couple. I don't know if the camera will see it. I'm sure that we'll have this displayed on the crowdfunding site or on the website if you'd like. But there
Very
it is.
cool.
I don't know if you can see it well, but it's very atypical. It's not like others. Other people like Lehigh or Liberty Ammunition, they come out with different bullets, and of course they got like 20 patents on it. It's all silly. But they're more or less. I mean, they're incrementally different. This is entirely different materials, entirely different mass. So we're kind of starting with scratch, and a lot of the typical methods that reloaders use to work up their loads and figure out their loading data doesn't work for us. We're really pushing the limits, and this equipment is very expensive. On top of that, we need, of course, body armor to shoot through. Lots of it.
Right, yeah. Which isn't
lots
cheap.
of different kinds. Yeah, it's not. So there's, I mean, the testing supplies right there. That's perhaps the greatest of the costs. Then after that, I've got to make prototypes, which is again very difficult. They're not a simple geometry, and I've got to pay machine shops to make these for me, at least now, because I don't have the equipment. I'm planning on getting a lathe into my home shop so that I can make them myself, but of course that costs some money too.
Yeah.
So even just producing the prototypes. And then after that, essentially we've got the legal fees, and that's probably the second highest. I've got a law firm that I'm working with in Washington, D.C., very well respected. They've done a lot of really high-profile cases. But I need that protection. This is really kind of unprecedented stuff. It's a new kind of challenge. And the cost of living in D.C. is high, and especially for lawyers.
Yeah.
Or, at least their salaries are high, and I'll be paying that. We'll see. The kind of the way that it works, because I'm willing to push the envelope, but I'm not going to step into. I don't want to go to prison.
Right. Yeah.
I can't accomplish any more if I go to prison.
Your life isn't served that way.
Yeah. Right. So I've got to submit prototypes to the ATF to make sure that they are legal by the current letter of the law. I don't know how that process will carry on. So, now I don't know. I have this enormous range that I could have to pay the law firm. So that's huge. That's
all those billable hours if you need them.
Oh man, yeah. But I mean, it's critical. Unfortunately, it sucks because, just like on everything, you think about it. You think about all the lawyers out there, all the legislators, all the bureaucrats, all the administrators and everything, and you think, if I didn't have to pay lawyers in this project, think how much farther this funding would go. Yeah. And then you kind of zoom out and you start looking at the world and imagine if the state didn't exist and you had all those people, doing jobs with no market value that nobody wants to be done. Think about the wealth that would be preserved and how much better off the world would be. But yeah, as far as my project goes, a big sink on the funding is just going to be the legal team to keep me out of prison.
Yeah, I think that's a good lesson to learn from, like Silk Road, Ross Ulbricht. It's a travesty what's happened to that man and his family and his community. Edward Snowden and Julian Assange. Like there are many people who have done this, and if that's I think we should use wisdom and try,
Sure.
everybody can be like, well, F the state or whatever. But really the best ways that you can do that is to try and preserve your own, what freedom that you have.
Yeah, right.
Because,
right.
you're not served and you're not able to serve anyone else, humanity at all if you're in a state
Sure.
rape cage.
The state knows how to point a gun at one man and lock him up in a cage, but the state does not know how to rule over many people, millions of people that are flying the face. And a good study of this, it's amazing. And it gives me actually good optimism that the, will not comply crowd seems to be coming out of, as we would call them, like mainstream conservatives.
Yeah.
And that's a really good first step. I think it might take them a while to figure out that the necessary second step, if you want that to be effective, is to defend with your own guns the individuals that are dragged away.
Yeah.
But at least this gives me it gives me a lot of hope. It's just I'm one guy and I know I got to keep my nose clean in everything that I do.
Yeah, that's true.
That'll take me away.
The laws are created to trap us. Like that's what they're for. They're not because we were talking about Reagan earlier banning, this type of ammunition and other things, but the state, their agents aren't banned from that. They have these exceptions to those laws.
Some are more equal than others. And funny thing is, it always seems to be the pigs that are more equal than others. That's
a nice little wordplay you just did there with the animal farm.
It's such a good coincidence. You almost think it's not a coincidence.
Yeah. Might have had something to do with that.
I don't know.
But so I looking at just like these institutions that are supposedly set up to protect our gun, lobby for gun rights to this state power, the NRA being one, which they might as well just get out of the business. Like in my opinion, if you can say, well, bump stocks don't matter, we'll just it is something stupid. Like I get that it's a small thing, but it's still, you have to hold the line somewhere. And the NRA has proven it many times before, just recently, that they're not willing to do that.
Right. And I don't even think it's that. I think that people who have really been on the ground level of firearms freedom in this country have, for decades not supported the NRA. I mean, they helped write the 1968 regulations. They're responsible for the machine gun ban. And in the same year, there were, as I think, I don't know if it was before we started recording or not, but in 1985, you go and look at the hearings that happened.
Yeah.
And before they banned it, and the NRA come in, they would argue, of course, for the rights of the dealers and to sell the stock that they still had, because of course they are a corporate lobby above anything else. But they refused to say a single word about the people's liberty being infringed by prohibition on manufacture.
Yeah.
So
it's again the rhetoric. You have the rhetoric down, but not the principle of the thing. That's why principles are important, because there are things worth not budging on, and that should be one of them. Is people's right to the very nature, defending the very nature of what they are, which is living. We have to be able to defend that in whatever way is we see fit. That is the best for us. So, I get really frustrated with the NRA crowd and people who are sort of blind to that. I'm just really surprised that anybody really supports them anymore when there are other organizations out there doing a better job.
It's because they'll give you a sticker to put on your busted down truck. That's why.
That's a good,
that's terribly.
It's kind of like first to market. They're the most famous, and so
yeah, I think so. And but like I go to gun shows all the time, and the guys that are sitting in the NRA booth wanting me to join, they're always old. They've got white mustaches, and so I think like they're stuck in that tradition, like you were saying. But I think that that the younger generations, they know what's going on, and I think that if you're gonna be a card carrying member of gun rights organization now. I mean, everybody knows. You go to Gun Owners of America, you go to the Second Amendment Foundation, Firearms Policy Coalition, one of these others, and they do a good job.
Yeah.
They stand back. You know, they stand their ground
Right.
when the legislature wants to take some more grounds.
Yeah. For the good, for the common good.
Yeah.
But another interesting aspect of what you're doing is, are you completely open source, or how are you handling it? I know you've got some parts of that that are open source.
Yeah, this is I mean, like I've written a patent before. I know how it works. That 20.
You're so young. That's what it amazes me that you're so young and you've done these things.
I feel so old. I look at Thomas Jefferson killed his government by the time he was my age, and Isaac Newton had invented calculus. I mean, so I feel behind in a lot of ways. I don't know. Maybe it's just me being hard on myself, but it's a good driving force, if nothing else.
Sure.
But yeah, so my company, 2020 Armor, survives on patents, you know, and I don't wholly own that company. And honestly, I don't think I would have crossed the big A word and labeled myself an anarchist back when I was doing that, only just a couple of years ago. So I'm no stranger to that. And I think that, you know, if I imagine the kind of liberal society I'd like to live in, I think there are some protections of, I don't know, for lack of a better term, intellectual property. But
Sure.
I mean, I don't believe in monopolies. I don't believe in armed men coming to your house, breaking your door down, and putting you in a cell at gunpoint as an escalation from, you know, selling something that somebody else thought up.
Right.
I don't believe in that. So to be true to my principles, I have a patent on this, a provisional right now. That will turn into a full patent, and I can do that all myself because I've been through it. But I don't plan on enforcing it. Mm-hmm. I think we're a bit off on the question here. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. And just how open source is
you
right,
developing?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I apologize.
I do that all the time.
Yeah. Get going and I realize there's something else. So there'll be a patent, and in fact, through the patent, people will. I mean, that will be beautiful in my mind. That's part of my strategy is that I'll publish what I'm doing, but if nothing else, I mean, the patent is there. The government will literally publish this themselves. How beautiful is that?
That is pretty. That's
you don't
pretty
want
beautiful.
What, why did you publish it? So, and then also we've seen in the past that the government likes to use intellectual property, and you know, it's corporate cronies. They like to use intellectual property to, you know, roundabout enforce some prohibitions that otherwise they have no they haven't given themselves the authority to do it otherwise.
They certainly have no natural authority to do that.
Yeah, right. So there's no way anybody can say that this isn't mine and I don't own the ideas. But I don't want to enforce those patents on anyone else. So what I plan on doing is as I develop this, I'll get to kind of mile markers, or I'll get to points where I have something that's really useful, and that I think the public will be able to make use of. I'll clean it up, put it in a nice package, easy to read, ready to go, so that when you make this stuff DIY, you'll be able to do it really easily, and I'll put it out there. I'm not exactly sure how yet. Because, as you know, there's still some court battles going on with notably Defense Distributed and the Second Amendment Foundation on how you can release those things. But I will. I'll put it out there, and I would love for people to be able to make this themselves in their own house. In fact, I will be publishing Ghost Gunner code.
Wow.
The Ghost Gunner, of course, is an open source mill developed by Defense Distributed, kind of aimed at doing firearms related builds, but it's not limited to that. And I think the idea was that they would put this out, and then everybody would start, you know, sharing plans with each other, and that just never happened. And it's a shame too. But I want to do this. I want to put this out there. and I'm making it as easy to make at home as possible. If you have a drill press, if you have a lathe, if you have a ghost gunner, you'll be able to make this at home.
Wow.
And
Amazing.
that's kind of the finality for me. And again, that way it doesn't matter what the rulers on the hill say. Everyone knows that it's as easy to make as anything else. You can walk outside and throw a rock at somebody, and now you'll be able
Right.
to make a armor-piercing, well, I shouldn't say that, an armor-penetrating bullet in your own home as well.
Sure.
So yeah, that's how open source I'm gonna make it.
That's great. As you were talking, I was reminded of something Daniel had also taught me, because he's like my gun guy, my producer, Daniel, about, was it AR-15s that the government actually made so that they could be manufactured in, say, Africa or wherever. AK-47, okay, where they could be cut out. If you had a machine shop and you could cut out metal, you could have this firearm, because we wanted the people who we were arming to be able to be armed. But now, for American citizens, for what that means to some people, to actually do this themselves is somehow a crazy notion.
Yeah, right.
And scary, and we already talked about it, but it gets frustrating with people sometimes. But that, I didn't even know that fact about the fact that they had done that, and then Americans couldn't do that for themselves.
Sure.
But also, this is not the only thing you've got planned eventually. This is just the spearhead foundational
this is
project,
just the
correct?
beginning. And I really wish I could share with you some of the projects I've got in the works. I'm really excited about them. These projects I have planned, some of them are, how do you say it? Essentially the holy grail of weapons technology innovation. It's the kinds of things that, I plan to do all this specifically for the individual. I have no intention, I don't care if the armies of the world can make this and put it on the battlefield effectively, right? I mean these to be for individuals to wield. So, I don't think the typical, weapons industry that's geared for militaries would be interested in it. But at least on the individual level, what I'm doing, if it were done by Heckler and Koch, if it was done by Colt, if it was done by Lockheed Martin, it would be the latest, greatest battle rifle you've ever seen. I'm just very excited about this concept. And of course it won't be, because it's meant for individuals. But it'll be amazing. I've got other things, I've got other projects in the works, manufacturing. So just kind of, these are the interstitial projects. There are some smaller ones that I'll do in between the larger ones. They'll just be nice. So I've got some, for instance, I've got some more stuff that's going to come out for the Ghost Gunner. I've just started to work on. We've have some add-ons for the Ghost Gunner. So we'll be.
Oh, cool.
I've got a project that will be augmenting the abilities of the Ghost Gunner, and so I want to support that as well. But then, of course, my big projects are all about new technology, not just making. AR-15s, they're an ancient technology now. They've been around forever. That's old tech. But my big projects are really making new technology and making it in a way that tomorrow's firearms are prohibition proof.
Wow, that's a brilliant. It makes me very thankful when I talk to people like you that I'm not a technical person. This would never be something I could do. So I'm really,
everyone's got their own niche.
Yeah,
I mean, you do the show.
Yeah,
that's your contribution to liberty.
But yeah, I'm really thankful that there are people like yourself who are putting their minds into, something to help people be more free rather than being paid off by the government to develop more war machines. Like that. That's the difference here. Is that the whole intent of what you're doing is for the regular person, the individual, to be able to express that right to self-defense. And I think that's a very noble calling, if you will. Like, I think that that's a really important thing that we should all be doing is where can we develop ourselves? Because we talk about the individual a lot, but I think you would probably agree with me that to have an anarchist society, you need community. Like, I think a lot of younger people, like, the younger piss and vinegar, say 20-year-old kid guy that is just learning these things, sometimes thinks that the individual is sacred. And in a way that's true, but they're not, nobody's an island, right? We definitely, especially if you're going to have a society where there aren't social, big state social programs,
right.
You need community to help you.
It's cooperation, not collectivism. That's really the idea.
Mutual aid. And so our, as a person of faith, I know that I'm sure you probably believe that each person is endowed by their creator to have certain gifts and abilities. And so I think even my atheist friends would agree that people have their gifts in life. And so really, I think that's part of at least my own personal philosophy is that I need to develop myself to be useful to myself and by extension, my family and my community and mankind as a whole, if you will, because those contributions are so important. And we, the old saying, we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? And we really do, because there have been people that have come before us, like, Ayn Rand and Rothbard and, all the different people, Mises, whoever, many different fields and many different philosophers that have enabled us to get to where we are in our thinking today, because we didn't come up with, the non-aggression principle or something, even though it's a fact of life, but to have that put into words is a really important concept. And I think about 1984, which is a book I love and I've read many times. And one of the things that always fascinates me is the connection between language and thought, and how the reason that they cut language out was because it's very hard to communicate to your fellow man.
Right.
Even if you can understand it and conceptualize it, that's difficult without the language for it, but it's certainly difficult to communicate without the language.
I think a lot about that as well, and how sometimes you need the words, not only to formulate the word, to express your thoughts, but to formulate your thoughts.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. In fact, actually, in college, I kind of got in trouble because I was taking a class on Chinese culture, and my paper at the end was going to be on how the Chinese language in its kind of, it has like finite words. I mean, the way it is, there's not a lot of word selection. So to express many ideas, you have to use a kind of like poetry or figurative language. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of talking about like maybe the Chinese culture has didn't reach the kind of heights of like the Western Enlightenment because of the lack of specific words. And even today, I mean, they have very little word choice for liberty and life.
Right.
And the word for human life is the same. It's just like the mechanical breath of animals is kind of the word. So
it's really interesting.
I don't know. I mean, that's a little in the weeds, but I do think a lot about that, about how we need the words, and you can't invent new words. It just has to happen as an organic evolution of the society.
Yeah, and it's really interesting you're saying about the Chinese, because clearly, as a people, if you will, they're brilliant. Like there have been many brilliant inventions by, say, the Chinese.
Intellectually, sure.
Yeah. So, but that's a really important reason that the Western philosophical tradition is important, because it just happened to take on a different.
Yeah, they happen to have a different lingual structure.
Yeah, and it developed from that.
It's a kind of guns, germs, and steel thing.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah. It really is, so many things are, like I view life as sort of a web, and things are intertwined, and we don't necessarily always know all the connections and why a certain culture develops in a certain way. But it's good to recognize the strengths of certain culture and to be able to appreciate that line of thinking. Like, if you're going to just look at sheer technology, the Chinese would be a great culture to look at because,
right.
fire, gunpowder and paper, or was it paper?
I mean,
Maybe not
sure,
paper,
they have an intelligence, and I mean, no one can deny that. But it's just, I mean, why did science develop?
Yeah.
In the West, that's the question.
I remember years ago listening to a lecture from someone, I can't even remember where, but it was that in Asia and say Japan, I think specifically was where this was happening, was that they were teaching kids English so that they could do science better. Mm-hmm. And because of the language, that was the whole reason, because the scientific methods and all those things have been developed. They have Latin or Greek names, and those things you kind of have to, for some reason, English, is able to take in more of that scientific type language. So it just goes, I guess the whole point is that, we need to make sure that we are developing ourselves and developing our gifts with whatever culture we're from and whatever background we have and our personal abilities, so that we can bring things into the world that can be built upon and can improve people's lives. And that's really what I think we would want, is for people to be able to innovate and to be able to bring new technology, such as you're doing, into the world and make people's lives better. And you've already done that with your first, excuse me, your first 2020 armor.
Yeah.
And so, just kind of seeing how all those things come together, that each thing kind of prepares you for the next thing in life. And that sort of helps you choose the paths that you go on. And it's just to sort of maybe rambling here a bit about it, but I'm always fascinated by those types of things, how our own very language just shapes how we think. It's a really interesting
well,
think about.
Mean, if I could convey something to the audience or the to people out there, it's that life is yours and the world is yours for the taking. Go and get it.
Yeah.
Seize the day, and you don't have to, all those terrible authoritarian philosophers and their great man thesis or whatever. You don't have to wait for your heroes to come along. Be a hero. You can do it. I mean, and everybody has better or worse abilities and different things, but however you can, fulfill your potential. Don't wait for the technology to be developed. Don't ask. Do it.
Yeah.
That's important.
It's true. I think that's, for me, for sure, like just taking opportunities that are presented to you to learn something new. I tell my kids a lot, don't just assume that you can't do something or assume that you're not interested. Like, try it out.
Definitely.
Just, starting the radio show and has sort of led me into podcasting, and that is what I feel like I can do. Is if I can just even change one person's mind, then to me, that's sort of worth it. Like, I definitely want to be more effective than that, or help someone develop in the process they're going down while I develop myself, because teaching is learning, and learning, you learn to teach. And so I think that that's a really important thing to remember, is that to go ahead and do it. Like, you could have said to yourself, well, this is a great idea, but I'm not going to put myself out there like that, because really you put yourself out there financially, legally, and just to be ridiculed by people. Like, there are people out there who hate us because of what we think, that we believe. So
thine own self be true, they say. And truthfully, I couldn't give this up. I just couldn't. I'm in it now. I don't think that I would be able to pursue something else at this point. It's what I am now, and I will do it. I will make it happen, come hell or high water. And it's funny when I think about it, because when I think about it, before I started on this path, before a couple of years ago, when I started to think about my old ideas, which led to all of this, I wanted to build spacecraft.
Yeah.
I wanted to make toys. I was into airsoft. I wanted to make and guns have always fascinated me, but I want
Sure.
to make like airsoft grenades and better airsoft shotguns. And, I like playing airsoft. I make toys. That's what
Right.
I would do. But now, I see the evil of the state. That's got to be first.
Yeah.
There's no way. I just can't put that. I mean, I would love, if we had a perfect world, I'd love to make toys.
Yeah.
But now there's this, and it's my fight, and I got to
Sure.
do it.
That's awesome. I think it's sort of that, that maturing of, well, this is really great, and the interest in it is fine, but what do I really want to contribute to people? And if you have the ability to contribute to the actual quality of life, I think that's a really great thing. So where can people help you out? Like, for one, if anyone's listening or watching that can actually contribute intellectually or with their skills.
Sure. Okay. So right now, I've got a very small band of people. I've got a good friend, Mike Crumling, who's he had his own moment of fame a few years ago with some 3D printed gun technology that he was involved with, and he's been on the Discovery Channel recently for some of the stuff he's made. I've got him, and I've got a couple other people that are helping me out, but I could use some more engineers. I could use somebody to write some software that I need. And everybody's got their own skill set. I need people. There are a lot of people who call themselves libertarians out there, and I would ask them to join me. If you think you can't contribute much, see what you can. If you're interested in helping me out, I could use some people. So, send me an email. It's just austin@atlasarms.org.
Okay.
Or there's like a form on our website. But, and of course, I have to say immediately, I need a universal receiver. I got to pay the lawyers. I need some money. So, the best thing you could do is send me $1 or $2. Hopefully more than that, but whatever you can is very much appreciated.
Yeah.
And I do have a crowdfunding site, Gun Dynamics, as you said. You can either find me at Gun Dynamics, or you can go to our website, atlasarms.org, and there'll be a link to the page. Big buttons right there on the side.
Right.
Donate. Right now, we're recording this before the campaign launches. But right now, you can donate. You can go to Gun Dynamics and donate with PayPal or credit card, USD, or you can donate. There's a page on my site where you can donate Bitcoin.
Great.
So
Get those cryptos
that
involved.
really helps me out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. We'll also put links to everything in the show notes so people can find them and have that going on. But also, if you appreciate this program, you can, if you feel so inclined, you can, what's our Patreon thing? Do we have Patreon? Yeah. Patreon.com/SherryVoluntary. Yeah.
Send the goodwill all around.
Yeah. But definitely get involved with Atlas Arms and what Austin is doing here, because that's such an important thing, just to even stand up against the state in such a big way is very intimidating. So, I got to give you kudos for that, because I find it.
What else is there?
Yeah, you really, it's a sacrifice. There are sacrifices that are made, and even if you love it, it can be a little bit of a sacrifice to put your whole, your life's work into something. So that's, I guess, it for us today. If you had anything else, Austin, that you wanted to get to people, or?
No, I think that's about it. I'd appreciate if you donate to the campaign. That's the only way it's going to happen. And if you have some skills you'd like to loan me, then I'd appreciate that too.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Austin. I really appreciate it. And for coming to, my house
That's
here.
Great. I love it. It's great. The FaceTime's wonderful.
Yeah, there's nothing like it. But that's it for us today, guys. Stay tuned for, I don't know what we got coming up next, but it'll be exciting, hopefully.
I'm sure.
Till next time. Peace.